When you think of the term montage, you probably think of something like this. Or maybe something like this. But montage is much more common than you'd think. It's a tool that permeates throughout all modern filmmaking and animation. These 3 shots, for example, are by definition montage. I didn't realize how little I knew about montage until I found 2 outstanding examples in modern anime that I wanted to understand better. And when I started researching the intricacies of montage, I found it's more complicated than I originally thought, with multiple definitions and tons of theory. But I really wanted to understand what made these specific stories so special. And at the center was more than just good use of montage as a tool, but an outstanding exploration of just how emotionally resonant montage can be. This isn't the first use of fantastic montage in storytelling, but both these stories fundamentally depend on outstanding use of montage, which is why it's so important that they were done so well. Welcome to a running series called Exploring Frieren. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about 2 different stories that felt like they were pursuing the perfect montage. Recently, I watched the 2024 Kiyotaka Oshiyama adaptation of Look Back. Oshiyama had a unique challenge in adapting a beloved web manga one-shot written by Tatsuki Fujimoto, the author behind the hyper-popular manga Chainsaw Man, which has also been adapted to widespread popularity. And this movie really did the manga justice. It has very quickly solidified itself as one of my favorite pieces of anime ever. It's a story that seemed to be perfectly written and created to emotionally resonate with me specifically. And while I do plan on making an entire video dedicated to exploring this specific film, I found myself immediately pulled towards understanding its use of montage. I've been talking about Frieren for a while now, and when I was first sitting down and coming up with all these ideas, I decided that at some point I would talk about Frieren's use of montage. And this is a perfect opportunity. These stories are capable of creating such strong emotional responses from me using a tool that in its most popular form is largely considered a cliché. Approaching something that has been used so many times across so many different stories in a way that feels fresh and special is worth dedicating time to try to understand. Hey, just a quick reminder that I am coming up on 100,000 subscribers. If this is the first of my videos you've seen, don't worry about subscribing, but if you've seen multiple and find yourself enjoying them, consider subscribing. Now back to the video. Earlier I mentioned that montage can have multiple meanings. What differentiates cuts in montage from other cuts in filmmaking is the separation between continuity and implication. I like this explanation from a guy named Nitty Gritty Studios in a video 7 years ago.
Single in meaning, neutral in content, into intellectual contexts and series. In other words, 2 neutral images colliding to illustrate a third, undepictable thing.
The French definition of montage points specifically to editing a film together, but montage as a technique, the more popular definition, originated with a director named Sergei Eisenstein. He wasn't the first to use montage, but he was the person that popularized it. This led to something called Soviet montage theory, where there are 5 different types of montage, each new one an innovation that built off the last. The first is metric montage, where shots are cut together based off of the number of frames. The second is a natural evolution of that, rhythmic montage, where cuts are put in places that feel more natural. The third is a tonal montage, where cuts are placed with specific tone in mind. Then there's overtonal, often dealing in more abstract theme and structure, instead of focusing on just tone and feeling, building something based off of those components. And the last is intellectual, where the montage is demonstrating an ideological or intellectual meaning. What is now seen as norm and practice at one point was innovation. If these seem simple and convoluted, that's because they are. Soviet montage theory is something that I actually don't enjoy exploring very much, because it feels like I'm not learning very much that I don't already intuitively understand, while also still finding myself confused at the phrasing. Almost all modern montage is rhythmic, and often fall into one of the final 3 categories, tonal, overtonal, or intellectual, exploring simple or abstract feelings or a specific idea. Montage, in its most simple definition, is a combination of shots that aren't serving the purpose to purely create continuity, which means it's everywhere. Like take for example those 3 frames that I mentioned earlier. You could argue that they're just setting continuity, showcasing the environment where Frieren and her party are getting their reward. But the inclusion of the stained glass window depicting the goddess implies a lot. When I think of modern, more overt use of montage, I think it often functions as a tool first, showcasing the passing of time, providing exposition, or juxtaposing two different stories. A really good example of this is a training montage or the execution of a plan in any heist film. You need to cover a larger range of time, and so you cut many things together to showcase it. In both Frieren and Look Back, these modern forms of montage are what we're going to be looking at. Montage functions as so much more than just tools in these shows, because their montages are a central component of the entire narrative. Frieren is a story about an elf that's lived over 1,000 years, one that spends a lot of time exploring the human condition, where the main character Frieren learns and recontextualizes her old journeys through new ones. This story takes place over huge ranges of time, and because time is such a central part of Frieren, the use of montage is so important. And Frieren's montages are beautiful, incredibly well-paced, packed full of unique information. There are little moments that you can read into and learn from, things that you didn't notice in previous viewings. Take one of the first montages from the first episode. So much information and tone is implied. I found myself immediately blown away, and if these montages weren't done so well, the story would be a lot less compelling. Because a super important part of the story is demonstrating the unique experience of living as long as Frieren has. What it would be like to be someone where 50 years can pass in the blink of an eye. But overall, one of the main things that makes Frieren's montages so special, and Look Back's even more so, is the ability to capture strong emotions in montage, something that can so often feel cheesy, especially in the way these two stories use it. It's an incredibly saturated tool, and with overuse comes cliché. One way to subvert that is referential, self-aware satire. One of my favorite stories of all time, Kaguya-sama Love is War, does this a lot. But both Frieren and Look Back approach montage with an intense amount of sincerity. Look Back is a movie that has a 50-minute runtime, incredibly short by any other filmmaking standard, and in that brief time, I found myself crying multiple times at different montages. I think a lot of the earlier montages weren't even meant to make people cry, but the story so beautifully captures the range of emotion that comes with being an artist, from heartbreaking self-doubt and wanting to quit to the extreme euphoria of when things come together beautifully or it just feels right. In a lot of ways, I'm a very melodramatic artist. I've written and made music professionally, and even if it doesn't really seem it, these videos mean a lot to me. There's a vulnerability in expressing yourself artistically, especially when you're trying to approach it with sincerity. And Look Back captures the huge ups and downs of all of this in these beautiful montages. Just like Frieren's, they play over outstanding scores. They're paced so well while jam-packed full of information. Look Back specifically loves using matching shots, and all the ways those matching shots change imply so much. How do you make something like two teenagers drawing in a room for months or even years so emotionally compelling? I do not think I'm the average viewer when I say that I cried during every single one of these montages, because when I initially asked that question of can you define what a montage is, a lot of you probably could express it more in feeling than actual definition, because montages as a tool have so much room for tone, and sometimes even intense emotional expression. One of the reasons I think montage has become such a popular tool for use is because of its ability to be efficient, showcasing important components of a story like the passing of huge amounts of time or providing important exposition in a highly consumable manner. Frieren and Look Back are incredibly efficient with the time they use. Look Back tells a remarkable story in an incredibly short runtime, and Frieren is so efficient despite its slow pacing, packed full of important moments and things to explore. And as montages are a tool with specific goals in mind, ultimately the question is, what did these montages do and offer that felt so unique to them? And as much as I'd like a clean and clear answer, something that feels formulaic and replicable, I think ultimately what made these montages so special to me is the way they felt. They were not just tools to help tell a story that was remarkable, they were the remarkable story. So inspiring that I felt the need to create an entire video exploring the pursuit of a perfect montage. And while I'm not sure that exactly exists, to me these do feel perfect.